Staff Sergeant Rebecca Morgan watched through her scope as 12 SEAL operators fought for their lives against overwhelming odds. Positioned high on a rocky outcrop overlooking the rugged terrain of Afghanistan's Korangal Valley, her finger hovered near the trigger of her SR-25 semi-automatic sniper rifle. The distant sounds of gunfire echoed through the mountains, the desperate battle of men facing their final moments. Through her earpiece, Lieutenant Commander Jason Taylor's voice crackled with controlled desperation. Eagle 6 to command. Enemy force approximately 5 times our size. 3 men down. Ammunition critical. Request immediate extraction. The response from command was swift but offered little hope. Eagle 6. Extraction inbound. ETA 45 minutes. Taylor's voice dropped an octave, the gravity of their situation evident. Command, we don't have 45 minutes. Rebecca's gray eyes narrowed as she calculated the brutal mathematics of survival. 12 SEAL operators with dwindling ammunition against 50 Taliban fighters. The outcome was inevitable unless something changed dramatically. But her orders were explicit. Maintain observation position, relay communications only. Do not engage. Her mind drifted to the man who had shaped her into the warrior she was today. Master Sergeant Frank Wilson, a Vietnam-era legend with 87 confirmed kills, had taken her under his wing when others doubted a woman could excel in the demanding role of combat sniper. At 68, Wilson was the embodiment of the old guard, a walking repository of battlefield wisdom earned through blood and sacrifice. There are 2 types of snipers, Wilson had told her during training, his weathered face creased by decades of sun and war. Those who follow orders blindly, and those who understand when lives outweigh protocol. The trick is knowing the difference. Rebecca remembered the day Wilson had presented her with the SR-25, the same model he had carried during his final tour. Semi-automatic, not as fashionable as bolt action among purists, he'd said, running his calloused fingers along the barrel. But when you need to engage multiple targets rapidly, there's nothing better. This saved an entire platoon in 68. The mission had seemed straightforward. A SEAL team led by Taylor would gather intelligence on a Taliban weapons cache. Rebecca's role? Overwatch from a distance, maintaining communications between the team and headquarters. Intelligence had predicted minimal resistance, perhaps 10 fighters at most. But as Rebecca watched the situation unfold through her scope, she witnessed the fatal flaw in their intelligence. The SEALs had walked into a meticulously planned ambush. 50 Taliban fighters had emerged from hidden positions, armed with superior knowledge of the terrain and a lethal stockpile of weapons. The truth hit her like a physical blow. This was no coincidence. Someone had betrayed the mission. Scanning the battlefield through her scope, Rebecca noticed something that sent ice through her veins. On her tactical display, satellite imagery showed a separate group of Taliban fighters setting up anti-aircraft positions. Not just any fighters, these men moved with precision and purpose. They were preparing to shoot down the incoming extraction helicopter. Her radio crackled to life. Overwatch, this is command. Maintain your position. Continue observation only. Do not engage. Repeat, do not engage. Rebecca keyed her microphone. Command Overwatch. SEAL team is facing imminent danger. Enemy force has anti-aircraft capabilities positioned to target extraction. Request permission to provide fire support. The response came immediately, Colonel Harris's voice sharp with authority. Negative, Overwatch. You are explicitly ordered to maintain position. Air support is en route. Do not engage. Rebecca closed her eyes briefly, Wilson's voice echoing in her mind. Sometimes the only one who can help is the one brave enough to disobey. With steady hands, she checked her SR-25. 200 rounds of 7.62-meter ammunition, 10 magazines. She switched off the command frequency. leaving only the direct channel to Taylor's team open. The decision was made. There would be consequences, but those mattered less than 12 American lives hanging in the balance. As she prepared to move, Rebecca spotted something on her high-resolution display that made her blood run cold. Among the Taliban fighters was a figure different from the others. Taller, directing operations with unmistakable authority. The satellite image enhancement confirmed what seemed impossible. Aziz al-Zahir, former CIA operative turned traitor, responsible for the embassy bombing that killed 12 Americans in 2008. Intelligence had placed him in Pakistan, yet here he was, orchestrating this ambush. This wasn't just an ambush. It was a trap designed by someone who knew American tactics intimately. Rebecca slung her rifle and began her descent from the observation post. 5 kilometers of hostile territory lay between her and the besieged SEAL team. She would have to traverse it quickly, avoiding detection, while Taliban forces controlled the area. The weight of her decision pressed down harder than the equipment on her back. Violating direct orders meant potentially ending her military career, possibly facing court-martial. But failing to act meant certain death for Taylor and his men. As the sounds of gunfire intensified in the distance, Rebecca Morgan disappeared into the rugged landscape, a shadow moving with purpose toward the thunder of battle. The mountainous terrain of the Korangal Valley had claimed more American lives than Rebecca cared to remember. Now it served as both obstacle and ally as she navigated toward the embattled SEAL team. 5 kilometers through enemy territory, normally a 3-hour journey, had to be covered in less than 30 minutes. Wilson's training echoed in her mind as she moved. The difference between the living and the dead isn't always skill, he'd told her, during wilderness survival training. It's how you read the land. The Vietnamese taught me that terrain speaks to those willing to listen. Rebecca listened now, choosing paths hidden from observation, using natural features for concealment. Her movements were fluid, economical, the product of thousands of hours of training under Wilson's watchful eye. A Taliban patrol crossed her path unexpectedly. 3 fighters, moving casually, unaware of her presence. Rebecca froze, becoming one with the rocky outcropping that concealed her. Her breathing slowed to nearly nothing, a technique Wilson had drilled into her consciousness. Breathe like the mountain breathes, he'd instructed. Slowly, patiently. The human eye catches movement before detail. The patrol passed within 15 feet of her position, never noticing the American sniper hiding in plain sight. When they disappeared around a bend, Rebecca continued her advance, time slipping away with every careful step. After 27 minutes of grueling movement, she reached the periphery of the battlefield. The situation had deteriorated further. The SEAL team had established a defensive perimeter at the eastern edge of a clearing, using fallen trees and natural depressions for minimal cover. Taliban forces pressed from 3 sides, north, west, and south, maintaining disciplined, suppressive fire while maneuvering for final assault. Rebecca needed an elevated position with clear sight lines and adequate concealment. She found it. A massive boulder formation, approximately 400 meters northwest of the SEAL position. The climb was treacherous, but it offered the perfect vantage point. Settling into position, she unpacked her SR-25, checking the weapon with practiced efficiency. Through her scope, she counted approximately 50 Taliban fighters visible across the battlefield. Their tactical disposition was sophisticated, too sophisticated for typical insurgents. Al-Zahir's influence was evident in their deployment. Rebecca keyed her radio to the SEAL frequency. Eagle 6, this is Shadow. I'm in position 400 meters northwest with SR-25 and 200 rounds. Can provide precision fire support. Silence filled the channel for several seconds before Taylor responded. Shadow, this is Eagle 6. We're not authorized for sniper support in this AO. Are you supposed to be here? Negative, Eagle 6. Operating on my own initiative. You need fire support. I can provide it. Your call, Commander. Another pause punctuated by the crack of gunfire. When Taylor's voice returned, the pretense of protocol had vanished. Shadow, we're outnumbered 5 to 1, 3 wounded. Ammunition critical. If you can help, we need it now. Roger. Give me targets by priority. I'll start with command elements and heavy weapons. Command element approximately 150 meters north of our position. Large boulder formation. 4 or 5 enemy clustered. One directing assault with signals and radio. That's your primary target. Through her scope, Rebecca scanned north. She found the boulder formation Taylor described. Near its base stood a group of Taliban fighters in conference. One gestured toward the SEAL position while another spoke into a radio. But it was the third figure that captured Rebecca's complete attention. Aziz al-Zahir stood in plain view, his distinctive height and bearing unmistakable even at this distance. The former CIA operative who had betrayed his country was directing this assault personally. Rebecca's rangefinder confirmed. 425 meters. Well within the SR-25's effective range. The semi-automatic capability of her rifle would prove decisive. A bolt action might eliminate 1, possibly 2 targets before the survivors scattered. The SR-25 allowed for engaging multiple targets rapidly before they could react. Rebecca settled into her shooting position, muscle memory taking over from thousands of training repetitions. Body weight distributed optimally, rifle supported by the natural rock formation, eye positioned behind the scope, breathing controlled, trigger finger positioned correctly. Through her scope, the command element appeared with perfect clarity. She could see faces, real humans she was about to kill. That reality never disappeared for Rebecca, but she had made peace with it. These fighters were actively trying to kill 12 Americans, and she had the capability to stop them. She placed her crosshairs on al-Zahir, controlling her breathing as Wilson had taught her. Exhale halfway, hold naturally, and press. Don't pull, his gravelly voice instructed in her memory. The rifle fired with a sharp crack, the suppressor reducing but not eliminating the sound. Al-Zahir collapsed without knowing what hit him. Rebecca didn't pause to confirm the kill. The SR-25 had already chambered the next round automatically. She shifted to the radio operator and fired again. He went down. The third fighter turned in confusion. Rebecca's third shot dropped him. The fourth fighter began running. Her fourth shot caught him mid-stride. 4 command personnel eliminated in less than 10 seconds. The remaining Taliban fighters looked around in confusion, unable to identify the source of fire that had decapitated their command structure in an instant. Eagle 6, command element north neutralized. 4 down. What's next? Taylor's response came with newfound energy. Shadow, machine gun west suppressing us hard, approximately 200 meters behind large fallen log. We can't angle on it without exposing ourselves to direct fire. Rebecca shifted her observation west, scanning methodically. Movement caught her eye. 2 fighters operating a PKM machine gun, using a fallen tree for cover while pouring devastating fire into the SEAL position. Range, 380 meters. Partially concealed but presenting sufficient target area. She fired twice rapidly, less than 2 seconds between shots. Both gunners dropped. The PKM fell silent. West machine gun neutralized. Western perimeter has freedom of movement. Confirmed, Shadow. Difference is immediate. We can maneuver now. Over the next 20 minutes, Rebecca systematically engaged priority targets as Taylor identified them. A second machine gun on the southeastern approach. 2 fighters eliminated, PKM silenced. 6 enemy fighters gathering in a depression, preparing a coordinated rush. Rebecca engaged as they emerged, eliminating 4 before survivors scattered. 3 fighters dangerously close to the SEAL perimeter, preparing grenades. 3 rapid shots, all down before weapons could be thrown. The SR-25's semi-automatic capability proved decisive in exactly the way Wilson had predicted. With a bolt-action rifle, Rebecca might have engaged 15 to 20 targets in the same time frame. The SR-25 allowed her to eliminate more than twice that number, changing the tactical equation dramatically. Her elevated position provided an enormous advantage. Taliban fighters couldn't identify her location, as shots came from an unexpected direction and elevation. She maintained battlefield observation while remaining virtually invisible to the enemy. By the time Rebecca emptied her first magazine, 20 rounds, she had eliminated 16 fighters and silenced 3 heavy weapons positions. The Taliban assault lost coordination and momentum as their command structure disintegrated under her precision fire. She reloaded tactically, a smooth magazine exchange completed in under 3 seconds, muscle memory from countless training repetitions under Wilson's watchful eye. Her second magazine focused on breaking the enemy's offensive capability. Every time fighters gathered to plan an attack, Rebecca engaged them. Every time someone attempted to rally others, she eliminated them. Every time the enemy re-established heavy weapons positions, she engaged the crew before they could effectively deploy. The psychological effect was devastating. The Taliban had entered the engagement confident in their numerical superiority and terrain knowledge. They'd trapped the Americans and pressed toward what seemed an inevitable victory. Now they faced steady casualties from an unseen sniper who shot with impossible speed and accuracy. Their leadership was systematically eliminated. Their heavy weapons were repeatedly silenced. Every coordination attempt resulted in more casualties. Rebecca was preparing to engage another group of fighters when a searing pain exploded through her left shoulder. A Taliban fighter had spotted her position and fired. The bullet tore through muscle and tissue, narrowly missing bone. The impact nearly knocked her from her position. Warm blood soaked her uniform as darkness threatened to close in around her vision. The pain was excruciating, unlike anything she'd experienced before. For a moment, her resolve wavered. Pain is temporary. Failure is forever, Wilson's voice echoed in her mind from a training session when she'd pushed beyond exhaustion. When your body says stop, that's when you find out who you really are. Rebecca fought through the pain, applying a pressure bandage to her shoulder with her teeth and right hand. The wound was serious, but not immediately life-threatening. She could still function. She had to function. 12 lives depended on it. Adjusting her position to compensate for the injury, Rebecca returned to her scope. The battlefield had changed dramatically during her brief incapacitation. The Taliban force was losing cohesion, their coordinated assault deteriorating into individual actions without strategic purpose. Fighters were staying in cover longer, hesitating before movement, looking over shoulders for the invisible sniper who had turned the tide of battle. Eagle 6, enemy fighters withdrawing on your northern flank. They're losing appetite for this fight. Confirmed, Shadow. Pressure decreased significantly. Your fire support has completely changed the dynamics of this fight. What's your extraction status? Helicopter now 15 minutes out. We have potential landing zone 100 meters east, but it's exposed during approach. Can you overwatch our displacement? Affirmative. Move when ready. I'll engage anyone pursuing or flanking. The SEAL team began tactical withdrawal, moving with the disciplined precision that made them legendary. Half moved while half provided covering fire, then reversed roles. Textbook tactics, executed with flawless coordination. Rebecca provided continuous fire support, engaging any Taliban fighter who attempted to pursue or flank the retreating SEALs. When a group of 5 fighters attempted to circle south to cut off the team's route to the extraction point, she eliminated their leader and 2 others, causing the remaining fighters to abandon the maneuver. As the SEALs neared the extraction point, Rebecca spotted movement on a ridge to the west. Three Taliban fighters setting up an RPG position with clear line of sight to the approaching helicopter's flight path. She shifted immediately, engaging all three in rapid succession. The RPG team collapsed before they could establish their firing position. Then she faced an impossible choice. Through her scope, she spotted Al-Zahir, apparently having survived her earlier shot, limping toward a waiting vehicle supported by two fighters. Simultaneously, another Taliban team was preparing anti-aircraft weapons to target the approaching extraction helicopter, visible now as a distant speck against the sky. Rebecca had seconds to decide. Eliminate the traitor responsible for countless American deaths, or save the incoming helicopter and the SEAL team awaiting extraction. There was no real choice. Rebecca engaged the anti-aircraft position, eliminating all three operators in rapid succession. Al-Zahir disappeared into the vehicle, which sped away across the valley floor. The Black Hawk helicopter descended toward the landing zone, where the SEAL team had established a defensive perimeter. Rebecca maintained overwatch, eliminating any Taliban fighter who showed intent to engage the vulnerable aircraft during landing. Shadow Eagle 6, we're wheels up in 2 minutes. What's your exfil plan? I'll maintain overwatch until you're airborne, then displace and return to my observation post. Copy, Shadow. My entire team would be dead without you. We were down to our last magazines. 3 wounded we couldn't evacuate, enemy closing from 3 sides. We'd accepted we were dying here. Then you started engaging, and suddenly, we had a fighting chance. From all 12 of us. Thank you. You saved our lives today. Just doing what needed doing, Commander. Get your people home safe. As the helicopter lifted off with the SEAL team safely aboard, Rebecca began her own extraction. Her shoulder throbbed with each movement. Blood still seeping through the field dressing. She was weakening from blood loss, with 5 kilometers of hostile territory between her and safety. The Taliban were still searching for the mysterious sniper who had decimated their force. Rebecca could hear them calling to each other as they combed the battlefield. Her only advantage was they didn't know exactly what they were looking for. A lone American woman armed with an SR-25 and grim determination. Moving slowly, fighting waves of dizziness, Rebecca began the long journey back. 3 days later, Staff Sergeant Rebecca Morgan stood at attention in Colonel James Martinez's office at Bagram Airfield. Her left arm was in a sling, shoulder heavily bandaged beneath her uniform. The wound had required 27 stitches and narrowly missed severing a major artery. The doctors had told her she was lucky to be alive after losing so much blood during her 6-hour trek back to the observation post. Luck had nothing to do with it, Rebecca knew. It was Wilson's training that had kept her alive, his insistence that she learn to function despite pain, exhaustion, and blood loss. The difference between living and dying often comes down to who wants it more, he'd told her repeatedly. Colonel Martinez sat behind his desk, expression neutral as he reviewed the after-action reports. Staff Sergeant Morgan, he began, voice measured. I've been reading the reports from the SEAL extraction 3 days ago. Lieutenant Commander Taylor submitted a detailed account of what he calls unauthorized but absolutely critical fire support that prevented his team from being overrun. Yes, sir. According to reports, you were assigned observation and communications relay at Overwatch 3. Mission orders were explicit. Maintain observation, provide relay, report enemy activity. Orders did not include engaging enemy forces, conducting fire support, or moving from your assigned position, correct? Yes, sir. Mission orders were observation and relay only. Yet when you monitored the SEAL contact with enemy forces, you decided to abandon your position, move 5 kilometers through hostile territory, and conduct solo precision fire support against 50-plus fighters. Also correct? Yes, sir. When I assessed the SEAL team's situation and realized they faced imminent danger with no support available in time, I decided to move to where I could provide fire support. You made that decision after being explicitly ordered by Colonel Harris at Tactical Operations Center to maintain position and not engage. Yes, sir. I received that order and chose to disobey it. Martinez leaned back, studying her analytically. Staff Sergeant, what you did represents serious violations of operational protocol. Disobeying direct orders, abandoning an assigned mission, engaging outside authorized rules of engagement, operating independently without coordination. These aren't minor issues. They're fundamental violations of chain of command and operational discipline. I understand, sir. If I pursue this officially, you could face court-martial. Charges would be serious. Potential reduction in rank, forfeiture of pay, confinement, dishonorable discharge. Do you understand that? Yes, sir. I accept responsibility for my actions and am prepared to face whatever consequences you determine appropriate. Martinez nodded slowly. Now that we've established the regulations, let me tell you what else I know. He opened a file, pulling out a classified document. What I'm about to share is at the highest level of classification. It does not leave this room. Rebecca's pulse quickened. Yesterday, we arrested Colonel Harris, the same officer who ordered you to maintain position and not support the SEAL team. Martinez slid a photograph across the desk. Intelligence has confirmed that Harris has been in contact with Aziz al-Zahir for at least 14 months. He was feeding information to al-Zahir, including details of the SEAL operation. Rebecca stared at the photograph showing Harris meeting with an intermediary linked to al-Zahir. The betrayal was staggering. Harris deliberately positioned that SEAL team to be captured, not killed, Martinez continued. Al-Zahir wanted American prisoners for propaganda. Your intervention disrupted an elaborate trap years in the making. The revelation hit Rebecca like a physical blow. Sir, I had no idea. Of course you didn't. No one did, except a small counterintelligence team that has been tracking Harris for months. When you disobeyed his order, you weren't just saving those SEALs. You were unknowingly thwarting a major intelligence compromise. Martinez stood, walking to the window overlooking the base. So here's my dilemma, Staff Sergeant. By regulations, you deserve disciplinary action for multiple violations. But by any reasonable tactical assessment, you made exactly the right decision. You recognized that following orders meant allowing 12 Americans to die when you had the capability to save them. You prioritized mission success, defined as bringing Americans home alive, over procedural compliance, and you executed with exceptional skill and effectiveness. He turned back to face her. Lieutenant Commander Taylor's report indicates you engaged 60 to 70 fighters over 35 minutes, achieving approximately 50 eliminations. You systematically eliminated command elements, silenced 3 heavy weapons positions, broke multiple assaults, and provided such effective support that a 5-to-1 enemy advantage lost all offensive capability. Martinez returned to his desk. Taylor specifically notes your SR-25 semi-automatic was crucial. The rate of fire allowed engaging multiple targets rapidly, preventing the enemy from massing for assault. He states, and I quote, "Staff Sergeant Morgan's actions represent the most effective individual fire support I've witnessed in 15 years of combat operations." Sir, the SR-25 was key in that environment. My instructor, Master Sergeant Wilson, taught me that semi-automatic precision fire is ideal for target-rich scenarios. Frank Wilson? Martinez asked, eyebrow raised. The Vietnam-era sniper. Yes, sir. He was my primary instructor. He specifically trained me on the SR-25 for situations involving multiple targets. Martinez nodded thoughtfully. Wilson was legendary. I served with him briefly in the early days of Afghanistan. He had a saying about orders versus outcomes. Orders guide the mission, but saving lives is the mission, Rebecca quoted. That sounds like Frank, Martinez said with a faint smile. He was right more often than he was wrong. The colonel closed the folder. I've been in special operations over 20 years. I've commanded at every level from team leader to task force. What separates truly exceptional operators from merely competent ones isn't shooting skills or physical conditioning or tactical knowledge. It's judgment. The ability to recognize when a situation has changed from what was planned, when original orders no longer match reality, when initiative matters more than obedience. He stood again, this time walking to stand directly in front of Rebecca. That judgment is something we try teaching, but really, it's something people either have or don't. You displayed that judgment. You assessed the situation, recognized the approved plan was inadequate, and made a command decision to take action, violating orders but saving lives. That's what we need operators to be able to do in special operations. Make those hard calls when there's no time for permission, and the stakes are lives. Martinez returned to his desk and pulled out a new document. So, here's what I'm doing. I'll note in your record that you operated outside mission parameters during the SEAL extraction. That notation remains in your file. However, I'm also noting that your independent action directly resulted in the successful extraction of 12 personnel who would otherwise have been casualties. He signed the document with a flourish. I'm approving Taylor's Silver Star recommendation, and I'm reassigning you from general observation to permanent direct action support for SEAL operations. Rebecca felt surprise break through her professional composure. Sir? The SR-25 proved exactly the right weapon for that engagement. Semi-automatic precision allowing rapid, multiple-target engagement in a target-rich environment. You demonstrated employment techniques and effectiveness most snipers don't understand. I want you working directly with SEAL teams as dedicated precision fire support and training other snipers in semi-automatic employment. Your judgment and skills are too valuable for observation duty. Rebecca straightened. Sir, I want to be clear. I don't regret violating orders. If a similar situation arose, I would make the same decision. Martinez smiled slightly. I know, that's exactly why I'm making this assignment. 1 year later, Sergeant First Class Rebecca Morgan stood before 40 students at the Special Operations Sniper School. The promotion had come 6 months after the incident, along with her new role developing training protocols for semi-automatic sniper support in direct action operations. The class included experienced snipers from various services, all selected for advanced training. The first day, a Marine asked the question clearly on everyone's mind. Sergeant First Class, everyone in the sniper community has heard the story about you saving that SEAL team. The numbers seem impossible. 50 enemies in 35 minutes by one shooter. How'd you do that? Rebecca had answered variations many times, never giving the same answer twice. Each audience needed different lesson aspects. For these experienced snipers, she focused on fundamental tactical principles. The numbers aren't impossible if you understand what actually happened, she began. I didn't engage 50 fighters in direct combat. I provided precision fire from a position of overwhelming tactical advantage against an enemy force that couldn't locate me, couldn't return effective fire, and couldn't coordinate because I systematically eliminated anyone providing leadership. She pulled up terrain imagery on the screen. Jungle environment was crucial. Thick vegetation limited the enemy's ability to mass or coordinate. Canopy blocked observation, making identifying my elevated position nearly impossible. Acoustic properties made pinpointing my fire source extremely difficult. I had advantages of position, elevation, observation, and surprise, making the engagement much less one-sided than the numbers suggest. A student asked, "But Sergeant, you used an SR-25. Most of us were taught bolt-action rifles are superior for precision. Why choose semi-automatic?" That's the most important tactical lesson, Rebecca replied. The SR-25 was absolutely crucial in that target-rich environment. Engaging multiple targets rapidly without coming off target to work a bolt was decisive. With a bolt action, I might have engaged 20 or 30 targets in the same period. That wouldn't have been enough. The SEAL team would have been overrun while I worked my bolt between shots. Semi-automatic capability allowed engaging at a tempo matching the tactical situation. She advanced slides showing bolt action versus semi-automatic engagement time comparison. Here's the math. Bolt action. Even a highly skilled shooter needs 2 to 3 seconds between shots. Time required to work the bolt, reacquire target, fire again. With the SR-25, my time between shots was under 1 second. Just time to shift aim and press the trigger. Over 35 minutes, that fire rate difference translated to eliminating 3 times as many targets. A Navy sniper raised his hand. Sergeant, the story says you violated direct orders to conduct that mission. How do you decide when to disobey orders? What if you're wrong? Rebecca had expected this question. It was the hardest part of teaching judgment to young operators. That's the most difficult aspect of special operations, she said carefully. Most times, following orders and accomplishing the mission are the same thing. Chain of command exists for good reasons. Most situations are better handled through coordination than individual initiative. She paused, choosing her words with precision. But there are rare situations where orders don't match reality, where following procedures means failure or casualties when action might prevent that. When I heard those operators reporting their situation, outnumbered 5 to 1, running out of ammunition, wounded personnel, no support available in time, I had to make a judgment call. If I followed orders, staying in my observation position, 12 Americans would almost certainly die. If I moved to provide fire support, I might save them. But I'd definitely violate orders and potentially face court-martial. She looked around at 40 experienced snipers, most with multiple deployments. When you frame the choice that way, career consequences versus American lives, it's not actually a difficult decision. But how do you know you're making the right call? The student persisted. What if the situation wasn't as bad? What if support was coming? What if you made things worse? You don't know for certain, Rebecca admitted. You make the best assessment with available information, then accept responsibility for the outcome. In that situation, I assessed the SEAL team was in immediate danger of being overrun. No support would arrive in time through official channels, and I had specific capability to help. My assessment turned out correct, but if it had been wrong, I'd still be responsible for the consequences. 6 months later, Rebecca received word that Master Sergeant Frank Wilson had been admitted to the VA Medical Center in Walter Reed. Age and old war injuries had finally caught up with the legendary sniper. When she entered his room, Wilson was propped up in bed, thin and pale but with the same intense eyes she remembered. A small television played news in the background, volume low. Sergeant First Class Morgan, he greeted her with a weak smile. Or should I say, the shadow that brings thunder. That's what they're calling you now, isn't it? Just something the SEALs came up with, Sergeant, Rebecca replied, taking a seat beside his bed. Don't sergeant me, Rebecca. I'm just Frank now. An old man watching the world from a hospital bed instead of a sniper hide. Rebecca set a wooden box on the bed beside him. I brought you something. Wilson opened the box to find a Silver Star medal nestled in velvet. Beside it lay a photograph, Rebecca with Taylor and his SEAL team, all alive because of her actions that day. The medal ceremony was last week, she explained. I wanted you to have it. Without your training, those men would be dead, and I'd probably be alongside them. Wilson lifted the medal, letting it catch the light. They don't give these for following rulebooks, he said quietly. No, they don't. Tell me about that day, Wilson requested. The real version, not the one they're telling in the training schools. Rebecca described the events in detail. The desperate situation, her decision to disobey orders, the punishing journey through hostile territory, the precision engagement that changed the dynamics of the battle, the wound that nearly killed her, and finally, the revelation about Colonel Harris's betrayal. When she finished, Wilson was silent for a long moment. "You know," he finally said, "in '68, during the Tet Offensive, I disobeyed a direct order to hold position, moved 2 kilometers to provide support for a platoon pinned down near Khe Sanh, used an early prototype of what would become the SR-25, engaged 37 NVA in 20 minutes, saved 23 Marines." He looked at Rebecca with clear eyes that belied his frail condition. "They wanted to court-martial me too. Instead, they gave me a Bronze Star and told me to keep my mouth shut about disobeying orders." He reached out, gripping Rebecca's hand with surprising strength. "The difference between a good soldier and a great one isn't about how well they follow orders. It's about knowing when something matters more than orders." Rebecca nodded, understanding flowing between teacher and student. "The world changes," Wilson continued. "Equipment changes. Enemies change. But some truths remain constant. Sometimes the only thing standing between good people and death is someone willing to make the hard call." He tapped the silver star. "Keep this. Put it somewhere you'll see it every day. Not as a reminder of what you did, but as a reminder of what you might need to do again someday." Rebecca slid the medal back into his hand. "I have something else to remind me of that. You taught me everything that mattered. The medal belongs with the teacher, not the student." Wilson's eyes glistened. "I trained hundreds of snipers in my career. Most were technically proficient. Some were exceptional. Only a handful understood the most important lesson, that sometimes the difference between following orders and doing what's right is a choice that defines not just careers, but lives saved and lessons that change how entire organizations think about courage, judgment, and what it means to refuse letting good people die when you have power to save them." He closed his hand around the silver star. "I'll keep this then. Not for me, but for all of us who've had to make that choice." On the television behind them, a news anchor reported the capture of Aziz al-Zahir in a raid conducted by SEAL Team 7, the same unit Rebecca had saved a year earlier. The former CIA operative who had betrayed his country would finally face justice. Wilson smiled. "Seems like your story isn't finished yet." "No," Rebecca agreed. "But thanks to you, I know how to write the next chapter." As she left the hospital, Rebecca thought about the 40 snipers currently training under her program. Men and women learning not just how to shoot, but how to make the critical judgments that defined true warriors. Wilson's legacy would continue through them, a lineage of protectors who understood that sometimes the bravest act isn't following orders, but knowing when something matters more. Some would face moments like she had in that rocky outcropping in Afghanistan. Moments when protocol collided with duty, when rules contradicted the fundamental mission of bringing Americans home alive. When those moments came, they would be ready, not just with skill and equipment, but with the wisdom to make the hard call and the courage to accept the consequences. That was Wilson's true gift to her, and her gift to those who would follow. The understanding that in the space between orders and outcomes lies the true measure of a warrior's heart. The end.